and worrying over the possibility of being stricken by it. The fourth basic fear, the fear of loss of love. Jealousy and other similar forms of neurosis grow out of our fear of the loss of love of someone. This fear is the most painful of all the 6 basic fears. It probably plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears. Editor's comment. By way of introduction to each of the 6 basic fears, Napoleon Hill usually postulates how the fear originated in humans. In the original edition of this book, he suggested that the fear of loss of love may have started with prehistoric man's habit of stealing his neighbor's mate and taking liberties with her whenever he could. Though amusing, this theory does not take into account that women fear the loss of a love just as profoundly as men do, and both men and women fear losing the love of not just their mates, but also of family members and others with whom they are close. How the emotion of love originated may remain a mystery, but there is no mystery about how we feel when we lose it. This is the end of the editor's comment. The fourth basic fear, the fear of loss of love. Jealousy and other similar forms of neurosis grow out of our fear of the loss of love of someone. This fear is the most painful of all the 6 basic fears. It probably plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears. Editor's comment. By way of introduction to each of the 6 basic fears, Napoleon Hill usually postulates how the fear originated in humans. In the original edition of this book, he suggested that the fear of loss of love may have started with prehistoric man's habit of stealing his neighbor's mate and taking liberties with her whenever he could. Though amusing, this theory does not take into account that women fear the loss of a love just as profoundly as men do, and both men and women fear losing the love of not just their mates, but also of family members and others with whom they are close. How the emotion of love originated may remain a mystery, but there is no mystery about how we feel when we lose it. This is the end of the editor's comment. Symptoms of the fear of loss of love. The distinguishing symptoms of this fear are 1. Jealousy. The habit of being suspicious of friends and loved ones. The habit of accusing wife or husband of infidelity without grounds. General suspicion of everyone and absolute faith in no one. 2. Fault-finding. The habit of finding fault with friends, relatives, business associates, and loved ones upon the slightest provocation, or without any cause whatsoever. 3. Gambling. The habit of gambling, stealing, cheating, and otherwise taking hazardous chances to provide money for loved ones, in the belief that love can be bought. The habit of spending beyond your means, or incurring debts to provide gifts for loved ones, in order to make a good impression. Also insomnia, nervousness, lack of persistence, weakness of will, lack of self-control, lack of self-reliance, bad temper. The fifth basic fear, the fear of old age. In the main, this fear grows out of 2 sources. First, the thought that old age may bring with it poverty. Second is the concern that many have for what may await them in the world beyond. The most common cause of fear of old age is associated with the possibility of poverty. Poorhouse is not a pretty word. It throws a chill into the mind of every person who faces the possibility of having to spend declining years having to live on some form of charity. The possibility of ill health, which is more common as people grow older, is also a contributing cause of this common fear of old age, as is concern about diminishing sexuality. Another contributing cause of the fear of old age is the possibility of loss of freedom and independence, as old age may bring with it the loss of both physical and economic freedom. Symptoms of the fear of old age. The most common symptoms of this fear are 1. lack of enthusiasm, the tendency to slow down and develop an inferiority complex, falsely believing you are slipping because of age, the habit of killing off initiative, imagination, and self-reliance by falsely believing you are too old to exercise these qualities. 2. Self-consciousness of speech. The habit of speaking apologetically of yourself as being old merely because you have reached the age of 40 or 50, instead of reversing the rule and expressing gratitude for having reached the age of wisdom and understanding. 3. Inappropriate dress and action. Trying to appear much younger than your age by going overboard in your attempt to keep up with the style and mannerisms of youth. The sixth basic fear. The fear of death. To some, this is the cruelest of all the basic fears. The reason is obvious. The terrible pangs of fear associated with the thought of death, in the majority of cases, may be charged to religious fanaticism. So-called heathens are less afraid of death than the more civilized. For hundreds of millions of years we have been asking the still unanswered questions, where did I come from, and where am I going? During the darker ages of the past, the more cunning and crafty were not slow to offer the answer to these questions for a price. Come into my tent, embrace my faith, accept my dogmas, and I will give you a ticket that will admit you straight into heaven when you die, says the religious leader. Remain out of my tent, says the same leader, and the devil will take you and burn you throughout eternity. The thought of eternal punishment destroys interest in life and makes happiness impossible. While the religious leader may not actually be able to provide safe conduct into heaven or send you to hell, the possibility of the latter seems terrible. The very thought of it takes hold of the imagination in such a realistic way that it paralyzes reason and sets up the fear of death. The fear of death is not as common now as it was during the age when there were no great colleges and universities. People of science have turned the spotlight of truth upon the world, and this truth is rapidly freeing men and women from this terrible fear of death. The young men and women who attend the colleges and universities are not easily impressed by fire and brimstone. Through knowledge, the fears of the dark ages that grip the mind have been dispelled. The entire world is made up of only four things: time, space, energy, and matter. In elementary physics, we learn that neither matter nor energy can be created or destroyed. Both matter and energy can be transformed, but neither can be destroyed. Life is energy, if it is anything. If neither energy nor matter can be destroyed, of course life itself cannot be destroyed. Life, like other forms of energy, may be passed through various processes of transition or change, but it cannot be destroyed. Death is mere transition. And if death is not mere change or transition, then nothing comes after death except a long, eternal, peaceful sleep. And sleep is nothing to be feared. If you can accept the logic of this, you may forever wipe out your fear of death. Symptoms of the fear of death. The general symptoms of this fear are: 1. The habit of thinking about dying, instead of making the most of life. This is generally due to lack of purpose or lack of a suitable occupation. This fear is more prevalent among the aged, but sometimes the more youthful are victims of it. The greatest of all remedies for the fear of death is a burning desire for achievement, backed by useful service to others. A busy person seldom has time to think about dying. A busy person finds life too thrilling to worry about death. 2. Sometimes the fear of death is closely associated with the fear of poverty, where death would leave loved ones poverty-stricken. 3. In other cases, the fear of death is caused by illness and the breakdown of physical body resistance. 4. The most common causes of the fear of death are ill health, poverty, lack of appropriate occupation, disappointment over love, insanity, and religious fanaticism. The disaster of worry and destructive thinking. Worry is a state of mind based upon fear. It works slowly but persistently. It is insidious and subtle. Step by step, it digs itself in until it paralyzes the reasoning faculty and destroys self-confidence and initiative. Worry is a form of sustained fear caused by indecision. Therefore, it is a state of mind that can be controlled. An unsettled mind is helpless. Indecision makes an unsettled mind. Most individuals lack the willpower to reach decisions promptly and to stand by them after they have been made. We do not worry over conditions once we have reached a decision to follow a definite line of action. I once interviewed a man who was sentenced to be electrocuted 2 hours later. The condemned man was the calmest of the 8 men who were in the death cell with him. His calmness prompted me to ask him how it felt to know that he was going into eternity in a short while. With a smile of confidence on his face, he said, "It feels fine. Just think, brother, my troubles will soon be over. I've had nothing but trouble all my life. It has been a hardship to get food and clothing. Soon, I will not need these things. I have felt fine ever since I learned for certain that I must die. I made up my mind then to accept my fate in good spirit." As he spoke, he devoured a dinner sufficient for 3 men, eating every mouthful of the food brought to him, and apparently enjoying it as much as if no disaster awaited him. Decision gave this man resignation to his fate. Decision can also prevent one's acceptance of undesired circumstances. Through indecision, the 6 basic fears become translated into a state of worry. Relieve yourself forever of the fear of death by reaching a decision to accept death as an inescapable event. Eliminate the fear of old age by reaching a decision to accept it not as a handicap, but as a great blessing that carries with it wisdom, self-control, and understanding. Master the fear of loss of love by reaching a decision to get along without love, if that is necessary. Defeat the fear of criticism by reaching a decision not to worry about what other people think, do, or say. Overcome the fear of ill health by the decision to forget symptoms, and whip the fear of poverty by